What is going on, everybody? How you all doing out there? I hope this video is finding you well. Welcome or welcome back to Get Right On In. My name is Andrew, for those of you who do not know, and today I am just going to be talking about my January 2022 wrap up. I've been off and on this channel a little bit over the last couple of months. If you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. But I had some good reads this month, so I thought it would be fun to come and make a little video to talk about them and share my experiences with you. So with all of that now out of the way, without further ado, let's get right on in. The first book that I finished this month was called The Hollow Places by Ursula Vernon, writing as T. Kingfisher, and this was a 3.75 out of 5 for me. It was a fun little adventure story. Our main character, Kara, moves into her uncle's taxidermy museum to help him out after she goes through a divorce. He leaves town for a few days and she discovers this tear in the wall, so along with the barista from the Cafe Simon, they go on this little Narnia type journey through that little tear in the wall into another world. They come across all of these creatures and they have to get back into our little Earth so that they can cover that gap in the wall and prevent anything from coming out into our world, as well as preventing anybody else from entering in from ours. So it was a fun little story. I actually really enjoyed it. It opened me up to this new author that I had never heard of, so I don't know, I really enjoyed it, and it actually moved me on to the second book that I finished for the month, which was called Bryony and Roses by the same author. I looked up all of her books and they've got all of them on Scribd, so I thought I would check out a couple more of them. This one is just a Beauty and the Beast retelling, so I don't really have much else to say about that. I just checked it out because it was actually a short book, so I just wanted to kind of get through an extra book for the month. And it was a nice Beauty and the Beast retelling, but if you know Beauty and the Beast, I don't really have much else to say about this one, so that's that. This one was also a 3.75 out of 5 for me because I thought it was really well done. Maybe it could have been a little bit better, but it also could have been a lot worse, so at least there's that. The next book that I finished this month is called The Boy Who Killed Demons by Dave Zeltzerman. Is that it? Zeltzerman? Yeah. I picked this one up at the library because I finally ventured out into the San Diego Central Library, which is a beautiful library. There's 39 of them here around town, so I'm gonna have to go check out a couple more, but I saw this one on the shelves and I picked it up and I read the little front cover and the first couple of pages, and it actually reminded me of a little zombie alien apocalypse story that I had written as a child, that was written in a journal form the same way that this little journal was written. I did enjoy this read. It was a bit of a quick read. It was only a 3 out of 5 for me because it wasn't really like amazing, but as I said, it did remind me of a story that I once wrote. So having had some little creative juice issues recently with some writer's block and some everything else block, it was just nice in that regard to reconnect with a former part of myself in that manner. But this wasn't the best book in the entire world. I don't know, it was just alright. Like I said, 3 out of 5. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. The next book on this list is actually a DNF. Holla, I hardly ever DNF books, but it's so much fun doing it when they come from the library. This book was called Nevermore by Harold Schechter, I think is how you say his last name. I picked up this book and another one called The Telltale Corpse from him from the library last month. I read The Telltale Corpse and it was pretty good. It's basically just like this little series that he has that essentially turns Edgar Allan Poe into Sherlock Holmes. So it takes the man of Edgar Allan Poe and turns him into the protagonist of the novel as he goes on these little mysterious adventures. I enjoyed The Telltale Corpse, but there was this thing because he just kept overusing the word visage to describe people's faces. So like their visages look like this and how their visages looked, and I don't know, all this stuff. So I was also watching RuPaul alongside of this just because I had done my little Alaska Thunderfuck interview and I had just gotten onto a little RuPaul kick. So every time I saw the word visage in that book, I just kept thinking of RuPaul going, Mr. Visage, which on the one hand is okay, but on the other hand, it just made me notice how much he used that word in that book, and it really started to drive me crazy because I was like, there are other words that you can use for people's expressions. So when I moved into Nevermore after taking a little break, I said if he overuses that word again in this book, I'm gonna have to DNF it. So 40 pages in, 5 uses of the word visage in. That was a DNF, so moving on from that. The next book I finished was The Art and Business of Teaching Yoga by Amy Ippoliti and Taro Smith. Just because any of you who might not know, I am actually studying to get my yoga teaching certification, so we'll see how all of that goes. I'm mostly just including this on this list because it is a book that I actually did read over the last month, and I made a bunch of notes, did a bunch of highlights just because it was a required read for my little program that I'm doing on teaching yoga. So watch me go and be the most badass yoga teacher that ever did exist, because I'm very excited about it. But I don't really have much to say about this book. If you're interested in teaching yoga, definitely a good one, but if you're not, then really no point in it for you. The next book that I finished this month, finally, was The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan. I am finally continuing on with my little Wheel of Time series read for the first time, because I've never read these books before. I just got the third book in the mail today to carry on with it, and I already have up to book 8, I think, after that as well, because I found those ones at the little thrift store down the street. I am buddy reading these books with Amanda over from the Reading and Writing Life, and we're basically just doing 2 chapters a day of these books, and by the end of the year we kind of should have all of them finished, I think, so it does come out to about a book-ish a month. If I didn't have to wait for the third one, I would already be a week into it, but I just had to wait for it to show up. I don't know, it wasn't here, so we are, I don't know, starting it tomorrow. Today is the 31st of January, so the day that this comes out is the 1st of the month, and I will be moving on into the Dragon Reborn to find out what happens next here in this book. I did enjoy this book. I actually had finished originally on page like 570 or something. That was where I found my little bookmark, and I just never finished the last 100 pages, which were really good in this book, so I really put it down just a page too early, but I think the wheel weaves as the wheel wills or something, or whatever that's supposed to be, so I think maybe that's just, I was meant to read this book this month and not any of the other months because the wheel just didn't want me to read it yet, so the wheel is ready for me to carry on now. Next up, I finished books 13 and 14 in the Animorphs series because last month I started rereading these. They have the first, I think, 30 books of audio on Scribd, so I've been doing them as immersion reads. I only have 1 book left before I have this entire series. I only need book 51, so if anyone else out there knows where I can get a hold of one of those, that's not $170, because apparently that book is in very high demand, so it costs so much money for that book, and I don't know, one day I might just have to cave so I have them all. But I am gonna be doing some sort of video on Animorphs. I originally was gonna be doing it based on 10 books at a time, like my little reviews or thoughts about it. I'm not really sure. I'm up to book 15 now, so I'm gonna have to decide what I wanna do on that soon. But one of the reasons that I stopped reading this as a kid was because I was actually really upset when I found out that like the second half of these books, the second half of this series, was largely ghost written. So I am also maybe thinking about just doing a video on that once I've finished, comparing like the first half of the series that was written by the author K.A. Applegate and her husband, and then the second half of the series that was largely ghost written, and that was when it started to kind of both gain and lose popularity. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to be doing with these little Animorphs videos yet, but I am carrying on reading this series. This one, book 13, I think is my favorite one so far. I really do love these books still. I don't know, like I don't know why they ever really completely went so far out of fashion that the 51st book is now $150 freaking to get, but it's fine. I still just think that this, like, for a kid series was just so intense and so mature for what they go through, and I will be putting out more thoughts on these books sometime, and I just have to decide how exactly I'm going to do it. But while I figure that out, I'm just reading them and taking my notes in the meantime. The next book that I finished this last month was called The Skin Map by Stephen R. Lawhead. It's the first book in the Bright Empires series. I also found this one at the library alongside of The Boy Who Killed Demons, and another book that I'm just started yesterday is a Tad Williams book called The Dirty Streets of Heaven, but we'll talk about that when I finish it next month. This book was pretty good, kind of confusing, a little bit all over the place. place, but also really interesting at the same time. Essentially, our main character, Kit, just discovers that there are ley lines and time travel and all of these things, and his great-grandpa comes to get him because he needs help, because there's some guy who's got the map that's tattooed on his body that jumps people around these ley lines, and Kit's girlfriend gets trapped back in time, and so there is a little bit of confusing things. I did enjoy this book. I liked the writing style of it. I'm interested enough to read the second book to see what happens. There are 5 books in this series, and I'm not really sure how this story is gonna be drawn on for that amount of time, but this one at least was worth the read for the first book of the series. I'm planning on picking up the second book because they actually have it at the library, and it's amazing when they have a complete series because that thing never happens. But I will be picking it up. They do also have all 5 books on Scribd, so I did this one as an immersion read. So I don't know, we'll see what happens. It was good. It wasn't my favorites out of, you know, all the books I read. I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. So that is The Skin Map by Stephen R. Lawhead in the Bright Empire series, and we'll see how I feel when I move on to book 2. And the last book that I read for this month, which was my favorite book, and actually I think one of my favorite books in recent times overall, it was called Night Books by J.A. White. I really liked this book a lot. I gave it a 4.75 out of 5. I don't give books 5 stars anymore just because I was forced to pick between either 4 stars or 5 stars from Goodreads for so many years that now that I'm using Storygraph, I'm not giving a book a 5 star unless it literally blows me so far out of the water that I'm never gonna stop talking about it to anybody ever again. But this book might actually be one of those books. I just listened to it on audio, so perhaps if I get a physical copy and like really immerse myself in the story and give it another go, I'll rate it even higher. But essentially this book is our main character Alex, who writes all of these little scary stories into this little thing that he calls his night books, like his little thoughts and whatever in his stories that he's sharing. And he gets scared of himself and he goes to throw away all of his stories, and he gets captured by this witch who throws him into her apartment, and she literally makes him tell her scary stories every day to keep him alive. And he meets another girl there, Yasmin, who's also a prisoner of this witch, and they basically band together to figure out what's happened to all of the other dead children who've come before them, and how to get through this witch, and how to get away from this witch, and how to get everything back into normal. And he's quickly running out of his little night book stories, and he's searching through the library for more ideas, and the witch throws him into, oh my gosh, it's just so much. I could just talk about it all day. It was a really good book, and as a writer especially, it was just a very touching story. I think anyone who wants to write fantasy books should definitely check this one out, just because what he goes through as a kid, it's just also how it is to be a writer, about being scared to share your stories, being scared of your own talent, your own abilities, your own this, your own that. But then sometimes that's all you need to like survive. It's like your creativity and your talent and your drive and your this, and oh gosh, it was so good. And apparently there's a sequel to this book coming out later on this year. I think it was called Grave Book is what I saw, but I don't know. I haven't really gotten too much into that because I literally just finished this book yesterday, but I will totally be reading that book because I really enjoyed night books a lot. So great way to end the month with my favorite book so far. So that will take care of my January 2022 wrap up, which was such a good reading month for me. I haven't had a good reading month like that in like a really long time. So I just really wanted to share my thoughts on some of my favorite and not so favorite reads of the last month. So how did January 2022 go for you readers out there? Or for you writers? How are your manuscripts going? How are your favorite series going that you're reading? How's everything going for all of you? I would love to know all about your lives down in the comments section. While you are down there, if you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you considered giving it a little thumbs up, as well as pressing on that little subscribe button to join me on Tuesdays and Thursdays when I do post content, which should hopefully be more soon, which I say every time I do this, but this was really fun and really cathartic and everything, getting back in front of the camera. So perhaps I'll see you next Tuesday, perhaps it'll be next Thursday, perhaps I'll start seeing you twice a week like I did when I first started this channel, and even from there, perhaps maybe I'll get back to doing 3 times a week and it'll be super fun. In the meantime, thank you all so much for joining me today, and I hope you all have a day just as beautiful as you, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!